Your Creative Push, episode 252.
Just start a project. I really think that creativity is a huge part of happiness, of a rounded life.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Amanda Giacomini. You might have already seen her work online, or you might have actually seen it in real life. Amanda embarked on this journey called 10,000 Buddhas, where she attempted to paint 10,000 Buddhas around the world. And she comes on the show today to talk about how that massive project started and how committing to such a large project can help your own creativity to anchor you down and then get into a flow state more easily. She also talks about how she has developed and embraced this new identity of 10,000 Buddhas, which kind of transcended her identity as Amanda. And also how she has avoided repetition. 10,000 of anything is a lot, and so she breaks down how she gets past all of that repetition. Amanda also talks about her practice of yoga and how it relates to her art and her creativity and her life, and also her creative relationship with her husband, MC Yogi, which is one of my new favorite musicians. A ton of valuable stuff in this episode, especially if you are somebody that is thinking about embarking on your own massive creative journey. If you have a giant goal in your mind, but you're too scared to get to it because it's such a big undertaking that could take you many years even, this is the episode for you. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Amanda Giacomini. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you have this amazing project that Maria Brophy kind of put me on to, 10,000 Buddhas. So I was wondering if maybe you could start out by telling us the story of how that massive project started.
Sure. Well, it started really just by a little seed of curiosity. I had seen some images from cave paintings in India called the Ajanta Caves, and I started to research them. I fell in love with these beautiful, rich, colored images of gods and goddesses and Buddhas. And several years later, I decided to go on a pilgrimage and see them in person. So when I arrived in India, after a long overnight train ride and a big adventure getting to central India, and I saw the cave paintings in person for the first time, it had a huge impact on me and planted a seed that would eventually become a 6-year, 10,000 Buddha project that took over my life.
And why the number 10,000?
10,000 was really a number that just came to me. I had started the project. The first 99 Buddhas took me about a year to paint. And in that process, I really fell in love with studying the Buddha and learning more about Buddhist philosophy. And when I was almost finished with the painting, I just felt like this is a wonderful experience for me. Every time I go to my studio, I'm surrounded by Buddhas. I'm immersing myself in a space that just felt really good. So I didn't want to stop, and the number 10,000 just sort of fell into my mind. I learned just recently, I was at the Dallas Asian Art Museum, and I met a scholar from China. As I've tried researching, like, why is 10,000 a significant number in Buddhism? And he told me that in Mahayana Buddhism, there's a belief that there are Buddhas, a multitude of Buddhas from the past, the present, and the future. And in certain temples and certain places all around the world, they have 10,000 Buddhas, either painted or little figurines of them. And he said it's calling 1,000 Buddhas from each of the 10 directions. And that's how they get to the number 10,000. So I loved this, learning this. It just feels like, oh, you're calling on these divine beings from all over, past, present, and future, and from the 10 directions to come and be in one place.
That's beautiful. I like that. Well, 10,000 is a huge number too. Like that people talk about that, like the 10,000 hour rule, like if you work 10,000 hours on something, then you're going to be an expert. And I'm sure that you're already an expert at painting Buddhas, but 10,000 is a huge number. So have there ever been moments of like despair when you're making a Buddha and you're just like, man, all I want to do is draw a dragon right now?
Not despair, but definitely sometimes where I've been like, oh, I'm like a factory worker churning out
Mm-hmm.
Buddhas. And then it kind of moves through that feeling of repetition into like a moment of grace where I'm like, wow, this is really beautiful. And I surprise myself that I keep learning how to paint them differently and using different mediums. And so I've surprised myself that the project has really evolved so much, staying with the same theme for so long, and yet it's continued to grow and turn out differently each time I paint a Buddha. So it seems to be endless.
And I've heard you talk about like kind of hitting a flow state or kind of a state of Zen while
Mhm.
you're doing that. So could we talk about that and how maybe people could get to that flow state in their own work?
I think there was something about committing to a big project and a big number that helped me get to that flow state. I think when we bounce around a lot in life, we bounce from every year we have a different job, or um, every few months we're changing locations. You never get a chance to root down into something. And so for me, the flow state happened when I really anchored myself in this project for a long period of time. With that, it's almost like when I was young, I used to dance, and we would have to rehearse and rehearse the same steps over and over and over again until finally the night of the performance would come, and there'd be this feeling of effortlessness that would happen when I was dancing on stage after months and months of rehearsal, where you're not thinking anymore, or I wasn't thinking anymore about the steps. They were just happening, and my body was moving and knew what to do. And I think I've experienced the same thing with this project, with the painting, where I no longer am thinking about it, or trying to figure it out. It's just happening, and it's a beautiful experience.
Now, do you think that comes from like a physical, like repetition of it, like muscle memory, or is it more of like that, like you said, like anchoring your mind into a specific thing that allows you to get to that kind of state?
I think it's both. I think it's both physical and mental. I think the physicality of it is that it's a familiar process and a familiar movement that definitely plays into it. There's sort of a level of comfort and ease with that, but also mentally, us having a focus definitely is part of it as well,
Right.
for sure.
I love that. So what's going to happen after Buddha 10,000?
Well, I actually got to
Oh, you
10,000.
did? Oh,
I
nice. Congrats. Yay.
Yeah, just about a month ago, I painted my 10,000th Buddha. It sort of snuck up on me. One day after I took class, we have a yoga studio here in California, and I started working on a few canvases. I had 3 canvases going, and I was spray painting them, and I just really got into it, and I was lining them up, and I did 2 or 3 canvases on the day, and I thought, I wonder where I'm at. I must be getting close. And so I went back to my studio and I started counting up the last few paintings I had done. I had sort of lost count. And when I added them up, the last Buddha I'd painted that day was the 10,000th.
Wow.
And it was such a cool feeling. It was like a sparkly, like wonderment feeling, to recognize that, after all these years, it had finally added up. And there it was. It was a beautiful day. I remember just having like sort of tears of joy that day that I, made a commitment to the goal and that I had kept it. And so it was nice to experience that. And then since then, it's just been accelerating. There's been no slowing down of the project.
Good.
Yeah. So I think I'm almost close. I think I'm almost at 11,000 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love that story, that moment, like that, like your body knows, like you forget to set your alarm clock, but you wake up anyway, like subconsciously, like your body knows, like, and it knew that you were close to your goal, and really you had just reached it. Exactly. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And when I started the project, I didn't actually keep count in the beginning. It was really something I was doing for myself.
Hmm.
And yeah, every time I saw somebody who I hadn't seen in a while and they asked me how I was doing and what I was up to, I would tell them about the project, and they would always ask, well, what number are you at? And so after about a few months of being asked this question, I thought, well, I guess I'll keep count. And so that's when I started to document and started to track everything I was painting. But from the beginning, I always had a feeling like I'll know when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was good to keep track. It kept me honest.
Yeah, I love that. And I think people can take a lot of inspiration from that, like just starting something for yourself and kind of committing and anchoring to that thing for yourself, not making it this like public thing that you're doing for other people, but having it be like an internal thing and then seeing where it goes.
Yeah, I think I've realized that sense of curiosity is really important for me as an artist. If something is interesting to you, follow it and see where it leads you. I think without that, this project would have never happened. So it was a process of one thing leading to another and staying curious and open to how it might want to evolve.
I love that. You talked about yoga too, and I know yoga is an important part of your life. Can you talk about that and how that relates to your art as well and your kind of creative process?
Sure. Well, I started practicing yoga. Oh my gosh, I think it's been 25 years now.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So it's been a long process of that. And in learning about yoga, once I did my teacher training, I started to travel to India and study with teachers over there. And my trips to India really inspired me because there's so much incredible art in India that has to do with yoga, and learning about all the yogic philosophy and the gods and goddesses helped me to learn more and delve deeper into my practice. And so I think that was all a precursor to the 10,000 Buddha project. So I think it was a process of learning more about yogic philosophy that led me to create more art. And I find that when I'm painting, when I'm making art, I'm thinking about yoga. And when I'm practicing yoga, I'm thinking about painting. It's been a really interesting marriage of the two things.
Now, would you say that the 10,000 Buddhas project, the identity, has it taken over your identity as like Amanda? Or is that even a bad thing?
It did kind of take over my identity. And again, this was something that just happened spontaneously. My husband and I travel a lot and we teach at a lot of yoga festivals. And I found a few years ago that people would start to say, hey, 10,000 Buddhas, like call me out across the yard with that name. And I think it's because my legal name, Amanda Giacomini, is a little bit hard to say and pronounce. And 10,000 Buddhas is easy. That became my Instagram handle. And so that's how people would start calling me by that name. And so I just thought that's easier than Giacomini.
Right.
So went with it. Yeah.
That's cool. And then so now that you're at 11,000 Buddhas, do you foresee like this project continuing further, or do you have like other creative projects in your mind that like are next?
I definitely see it continuing. I love doing the public murals, and that has been an evolution of the project the last few years. And I love making public art, so I want to keep doing that and really spread the Buddhas around the globe. And I also think there'll be opportunities to see what happens if there's other little curious threads that I pick up and start to travel with those. But for now, I'm still really loving the Buddhas. I think one thing I want to do is incorporate more of the teachings of the Buddha into the public art, maybe incorporating some of the words or the poetry of the tradition. And also stenciling. I've been using the same image of all these Buddhas sitting together. I did one big stencil of a single standing Buddha recently in Asheville, North Carolina, and that was really fun. So I'm thinking I might want to explore that as well.
Very cool. Now, would you have any advice for anybody that, because like 10,000, like you said, 10,000 Buddhas, that's a lot, and you want to make each one different, but they all kind of do look the same from far away. But then when you get up close, like you realize how different each of them are. Would you have any advice for anybody that wants to do like some sort of repetitive project and they feel like they're kind of like a factory worker, like they're doing the same thing over and over again? Like any advice for how to switch it up a little bit and kind of sprinkle in some uniqueness? Yeah,
one thing that really helped me was changing the scale. So going from making tiny little Buddhas to really big ones on the sides of buildings. So scale is one way to switch things up. Another place that I kept things fresh is with color and trying all different color themes and different materials of paint. So using golds and silvers, as well as a lot of oil paint and then spray paint. So medium is another way to switch it up. So if you can anchor yourself in a theme, you can change it in so many ways with color and scale and medium. I learned all different ways of making the Buddhas, from letterpress to screen printing to spray painting and stenciling to painting them by hand. And that's all given me a lot of sort of places to grow in the project.
Now, how about for people that want to undertake some massive project that would probably, they realize is going to take them like maybe multiple years to kind of see it through? Would you have any advice for them to start it out if they are maybe kind of shell-shocked at the thought of how long and how much effort it's going to take them?
Well, I don't have advice for that because for me, it just kind of, it evolved. I didn't set out to do, I guess I had no concept of how long it might take. It just was something that I took one step at a time. So I never really got overwhelmed by having a big goal. I'm very linear in my projects and in my thinking, and I just really took it one step at a time. It was like a slow, steady journey for me. So I never was like, oh, I'm going to climb this big mountain and got all freaked out by it. It just, one step at a time, really slow and steady. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very daunting to look at that big mountain and to imagine like a year's worth or multiple years worth, a decade's worth maybe of work, but to just take it piecemeal, just to take it one step at a time, I think is the best advice.
Yeah, it's definitely worked for me.
Now, can you talk about your relationship with your husband, MC Yogi, how you're able to feed off of each other and creatively speaking?
We're so lucky and so blessed to have so much in common as artists and as yogis that we have a really good time sharing and exchanging ideas and helping each other out in a lot of ways. So when I think I was really inspired by his work when he released his first album, which was called Elephant Power. He had this bizarre idea to write rap songs about Hindu deities and yoga philosophy. And it was really just so out of the box and unique that, no one had ever heard anything like it. And when that came out and really was something that people were having fun listening to, we started to travel together. And I have no musical ability at all. I'm pretty much tone deaf, but I wanted to travel with him and we wanted to be together. So we came up with, ways to make that work. And I started doing a visual component to his live show. I started learning how to do videos and VJing.
Oh, cool.
We would both design videos and edit them, and we worked with a lot of really talented people doing animations to the songs and then having that be part of the live show. So that was something that was really fun from the beginning, gave me a chance to travel and be with him and also add another interesting creative component to the live show. So that kind of set us off on a path together. And then we started to teach together. When we started yoga and we started our yoga studio, we didn't teach yoga together. But over the years when we would be invited to an event, we sort of figured out how to teach together. And he would lead the class and I would tell a story. And I got really into storytelling as part of my expression of yoga and learning about all the myths. So that was something, we just found another way to collaborate. And then when I started painting Buddhas, he was really helpful because he was a graffiti writer growing up.
Oh, cool.
And so he really knew his way around spray paint and stenciling. And so he gave me a lot of really good ideas on how to speed up my project and use street art techniques to get my numbers up and start to do things in a different way.
Very cool. Have there been any other like synchronistic moments? I love talking about synchronicity and like the moment of, feeling like you're at 10K and then realizing that you are at 10K.
Mm.
Have there been any other kind of synchronistic moments along your journey of 10K Buddhas?
I think all the public works that I've done really have just happened, or people have just reached out to me through the internet, through social media for different projects. And I think every time that happens, it feels very synchronistic. I've never really put out a word like, oh, I'd like to do a wall for you. It just happens. Each wall seems to lead to the next one. And so I'll be going along, painting my Buddhas, and then I'll get an email from the Dallas Asian Art Museum that they want a wall. And that's like amazing. It just sort of happened. Yeah. And then I'll be going along and some time passes and then, oh, the Waldorf in Palm Springs. The Waldorf there wanted a wall. And so each one goes into the next one. And I think that's been a really fun, synchronistic way.
So I was wondering, is there any other resistances that you face on a daily basis, like things that maybe you've gone through now or have gone through in the past that maybe try to hold you back?
I think for several years, I went through a phase where I really wasn't making that much art. And I would start a project and I couldn't continue. I would sort of give up. And that would happen for years. I would start something, I would do a few pieces, and then I would stall out. Almost like a creative miscarriage that would kept happening for several years. And so I think I share that because I think a lot of people have that. You get an idea, you get excited about it, and then you don't follow through. And then you feel a sense of defeat. And that happened for, I would say, 4 or 5 years of my artistic life. I would start something and give up. And I think when I landed on the 10,000 Buddha project, it really was the right project for me that really saved me from that cycle of not being able to carry something through. When I share that, I want people to know that when they start something, just keep trying different things. They may not be the right project. Sometimes you have to keep trying until you land on something that's right for you. And it takes trial and error to really find something that clicks.
Right. And to not be so hard on yourself. I've been there too. A lot of previous guests have been there too. And I think that what you said there is perfect. Like the idea of feeling defeated after it, if you can kind of get past that as quickly as possible and, like you said, move on to the next thing, to experiment and to try something else out. Because just because you didn't finish it, it doesn't mean that you like failed to like kind of birth this thing. You know what I mean? It just might not have been the right fit for you. And it's just like kind of your body or your mind telling you that, you know, it's not the right fit. So just to like kind of get over that, not feel too much shame, and not have too long of a gap where you're not creating stuff, to just find something else to fill that creative void, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think we go through times in our lives where things are flowing and things are stalled out, and it just is maybe astrology or just, I don't know what it is. I think that that I've learned to accept that there's times of productivity and times of frustration, and not get too upset about it. And the same thing I've really learned a lot from my yoga practice. There's been times when I felt really strong and I'm rocking it and doing really disciplined, and I'm going to class all the time and I'm studying with an amazing teacher, and my yoga is moving ahead in leaps and bounds. And then there's times of years that go by where I'm just, just feeling like a very average yogi and just doing, the basics. And, I'll have like a injury or something, and I just have to slow down, and I can't be amazing at it for a while. I just have to do something really simple and ordinary for a while. And it's still part of my life not to give up on it, but there'll be times when you're rocking it, and there's times when it'll be kind of average. And as artists, I think you just have to keep going and not get too attached to the outcome. And that's definitely a teaching from from the Bhagavad Gita and from yogic philosophy that you just have to put in the effort and you can't control the outcome all the time. So sometimes it's going to work out great and people are going to hire you to do amazing work, and sometimes no one's going to call you up or want to buy a painting for a while. That's okay.
Right. It's dealing with those ups and downs, not just with like the quote successes, like when people are reaching out to you for, commissions or stuff like that, but also just like the creative process. Like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And to recognize that there are ups and downs so that when you're down, you don't feel as down. It's just like one of the phases,
Yeah. And I think it's important when things are going well to really appreciate it and not take it for granted. There was a book I read once about don't eat up your good karma. So if some good karma is coming your way and you have some success in something, don't take it for granted and help somebody else who's struggling, because that will help increase your good karma and have more success coming to you. I really believe that.
Beautifully said. Amanda, this has been wonderful, but it's time for what we call the final push.
Okay.
And this is where I ask you to kind of reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions or start that big project that they've always wanted to do.
Well, I so appreciate the time. I wanted to encourage everybody to keep going with their projects that give them joy, that even if it's just for themselves, if it's a small thing, if it's making a drawing every day, just start a project. I really think that creativity is a huge part of happiness, of a rounded life. And even if you never sell anything or it doesn't become a big success, you'll find a lot of joy in it and make your life more satisfying. And so I encourage everybody to find something that makes them happy.
Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for giving us that push and for sharing your story. Congratulations on 10,000 Buddhas. That's so 11,000 Buddhas now. That's so impressive. And congratulations on kind of fulfilling that goal that you set out to do years ago.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. And you can find Amanda on her website, which is 10,000buddhas.com. That's the number. So 1 and then 4 zeros, buddhas.com. And on Instagram, she is 10,000 Buddhas the same way. And on Twitter, she is 10K Buddhas. And we'll have everything we talked about today linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/10,000 Buddhas. Amanda, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
So cool to hear about Amanda's journey. And I just want to remind you to let it evolve, people. If you have a massive goal, a massive project that you want to embark upon that you know is going to take you a long time, or even if you just are thinking about your creative career and trying to map it out, it's great to have big goals. It's great to have an overall thesis statement. We talk about that a lot on the show, to have an overall goal, but you still need to give yourself the flexibility to let that evolve. Because if you have your next 5-10 years mapped out in ink and you're unwilling to deviate from that path, you are sacrificing a ton of opportunities that are going to come as a result of you starting out. Allow yourself to have a big question mark along that path where you're able to deviate from that path, where you're able to pivot in a different direction as these new opportunities come up, as you learn new things. Yes, absolutely have a 5-year goal, have a 10-year goal, but be willing to embrace that unknowing and almost look forward for opportunities to deviate from that path. Amanda and her husband, MC Yogi, are going on a book tour. So if you want to find out if they're going to be at a location near you, definitely hit up the show notes page. We'll have all that linked up at yourcreativepush.com/10,000 Buddhas. On our next episode, we have Trills. Trills is a neo-figurative expressionist artist who comes on the show, and we have a very interesting, in-depth conversation about how art is a self-reflection, amongst many other things. It was a really great conversation. Such a smart and talented and thoughtful artist and person. If you want to check out Trills, you can find him on his website, which is trills.com. That's CHRILZ.com. Or on Instagram, he is TrillsArt, or we'll have that linked up again at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/252. Also, I was interviewed on the Paw Print podcast, which is all about animal rescue. So I talked about not only this podcast, but my relationship with my dogs, especially the dog that I had before I got married, Sadie, and kind of how that brought me together with my wife, Jess. It was a fun conversation with Harold Ree of the Paw Print podcast. He's an awesome guy, and he's doing an awesome thing with that show. And I'll link that up directly if you want to check that out at yourcreativepush.com/pawprint. But that is all I've got for you today on this show. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. I love you all so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time if you need the push again. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.